Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor.
Hello and welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. I'm outnumbered. We have the greatest minds in nutrition, in my opinion. Some of the people have impacted me greatly. So, Amy Berger, welcome. Dr.
Thank
Westman,
you.
welcome. It's so great to have you. Let's talk about your book. Let's just cut to the chase. Everyone knows who you are. We've talked about you both extensively on the podcast, and having you both team up. When I heard that, I was so excited. I think Amy told me that was going to happen. I was like, oh my gosh. Like having both of your wisdom and experience, it's very invaluable to us. So tell us about what message you have in this book. And I've looked through it, and it's going to be very helpful for patients for sure.
Well, Amy, you go first.
Well, for me, the title really says it all. The book is called End Your Carb Confusion. And, like Dr. Westman has been doing this forever. I've been doing it for a long time. And when we got started, it was simple. There was no, ketone meters didn't exist. You couldn't buy MCT oil at the store. There were no fat bombs. There was just the food. And there was so much less misinformation and overcomplication. And I think Dr. Westman and my philosophy kind of aligned, and it's the same as you and yours and Tro's, whatever is grammatically correct. Is, people have to do this in their real life, in the real world. They're on a budget. They don't have a lot of time. Some people are gourmet cooks. Some people are going to go through the fast food drive-through. How can we make a plan that is easy, like simple to understand and easy to do, no matter where you are in the journey and in the process? And that includes people that don't kick us out of the club, people that don't actually need strict keto. This is suitable for people that really need a very strict approach if they're very sick or very, very overweight. But we also walk you through, hey, maybe you're in a position where you can have slightly more carbs.
Exactly. I think that's what happens. We get pigeonholed and say, oh my gosh, you think carbs are the devil and it's the enemy. And you say, well, look, it depends on the person. We have to individualize it for the person in front of us. And Dr. Westman, you're the master of that. I think when we overcomplicate things and you make it too many restrictions and people say, forget it, I can't do it. If you say you can never, ever have a piece of bread in the rest of your life, people go, forget it. It's not worth it, right? If I go to the best French restaurant, I want to have a piece of bread, right? So I think it's that part when we get so, and Amy, you're the master of this. Like, don't be dogmatic. Look, don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Do what works for you ultimately.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. The 20, 30, gosh, how many years now? 20 years I've been using keto diets, and it's in a clinical setting mainly, where I'm fixing medical problems like you are. But I know there's a big wide world out there that they're not doing keto. In fact, there are probably billions of people who eat carbs every day and are apparently healthy, right? So, but it also gets personal. I have a brother who eats fruit all the time. He's lean, he's healthy. He's the natural exercising brother of three brothers, and he's always had more carbs. He's always been fit. And so there are individual differences even within a family. And then, so I wrote this book to explain what we've learned from the keto world about sugar, what the effects of sugar are in the body. And if we can just push the needle toward less sugar, as we do in the book, you're not going to be able to have regular Coca-Cola or Pepsi from our vantage point ever, but you can have potatoes and rice and pasta in moderation if your metabolism says you can. So I was trying to bring together okay, the reality that not everyone's going to do keto, it off-puts a lot of people even, but a lot of people don't even need keto. So I've studied the diets called the low glycemic diets. I've studied low fat diets and keto diets. So I have a familiarity with implementing them and doing them. And then when I met Amy at a keto event, the Adapt Your Life is a company I helped to found. And a professional writer. Amy has actually like training in writing. I'm a researcher who cobbled together research papers, right? But there is actually, a way of communicating that Amy has pulled off really well, I think, in keeping things simple. We don't demonize any foods. And then it was a strategic decision. We don't have one medical reference in the book, because it's settled science. I mean, and in fact, if you find a book now that has all these references by a doctor, you have to suspect that maybe they're trying to cover up something that doesn't work with all these scientific references. So, the fact that it works, there's so much research behind it, and that, no, it's not just another keto book. I think it's going to help a lot of people. That's our hope.
So don't try to tell me that you're going to say that people with clinical experience have some value in this world.
People with clinical experience have great value in this world, doctor.
Because I think that's the point. That's the point we always try to make here. It's like, look, we see something working. I don't care what all the experts say. It's working. If it's not working, then I'm going to say, experts, why isn't it working? That's when I would give you a phone call and say, oh, none of my patients are having benefits, right? So,
So I've lived through the last 25 years of, oh, you're going to be mortgaging your health. One day that high-fat diet will come and get you. The fear-mongering about it. Of course, none of that materialized, and yet you'll still hear that, oh, well, that's going to get you. It's not true. So, but that's where the science is very helpful for just reassuring that what we see clinically is good, and there's no edge of the earth that you're going to fall off.
Yeah, and you were really, when you started, you didn't have as much evidence as we have now, and you had to say it's working. And so you stuck to your guns and not say, well, everyone says this is crazy, so I'm not going to do it. And that's the thing. I think that's one of the things I've observed, and Amy, I know, has observed also, is that, people don't like dissenting opinions. Rather than saying, for instance, I'll give you an example. I was working out with Ben Bakikio, and his guy that works out with him is an absolute stud. I'm watching this kid work out. He's only 27 years old. He's been vegan for 4 years, mostly eats fruit. So I'm like, how does this guy put on muscle mass? How are you doing it? So I want to learn. I don't say, well, you're wrong in what you're doing. I say, wow, let's get you a continuous glucose monitor. Let's check your metabolic health and see where you're at. If you're metabolically healthy and you eat fruit as the majority of your diet, so be it, right? It may catch up with you down the road. I don't know, but I am intrigued by this. I would never say, well, veganism doesn't work. You can't have this muscle mass. You must be shooting, even if he's shooting steroids, because I consider that. He doesn't have a protein source to put that muscle on. How's he doing it? So I want to learn, so I can help my vegan patients, right? It's not like this whole us against them. And I think that's what a lot of times we throw ourselves into, rather than, there's extremists in all religions and all groups. And, I think that's what we're up against.
Yeah, I think something about our book that kind of goes along with this. There's people that part of the reason we don't have any references or citations is because, at least in Dr. Westman's opinion and mine, we don't say anything controversial. We don't really, because we don't say that black beans are killing you and that cantaloupe is causing diabetes. We don't say anything like that. And we're not keto zealots. I mean, the reason we actually have a chart in there that you fill out, and based on your answers, it points you toward a carbohydrate intake to start out with. And of course, we're not going to lie, most people are going to be pointed toward keto to start out with. And we emphasize to start out with, because even if let's say you do have morbid obesity or type 2 diabetes, PCOS, what have you, and you start with keto, let's say 6 months, 8 months, 2 years down the line, you've lost 100 pounds, your diabetes is reversed, everything's great. Do you need to eat super strict keto the whole rest of your life? Or might there be some room for more fruit or more beans, or even a slice of bread every now and then? Is that pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving going to kill you? And so we walk, because you're starting to see this a lot on Twitter. I know that people that had great success with keto are now starting to dabble with, slightly higher, not from garbage, but, butternut squash, beets, lentils, things like that in, small amounts. And they're doing just as well as they were. They're doing great. They're not regaining the weight. And so this is a message too, because keto is so powerful and so effective, but we end up feeling that that this is the way, this is the thing. And it is, but if you do lose 100 pounds or you reverse all these conditions, you are literally not the same person you were when you started, who needed 20 grams or fewer a day, or 30 or fewer. Maybe now you can have 50 or 60. So that's, I feel like that's unique in that we're actually saying, hey, maybe you can have a little bit more carbs sometime down the road.
That's absolutely, obviously I learned a lot from Dr. Westman. And so you look and you say, okay, look, you become a better machine down the road. So you're going to run your machine on one fuel here, like Zach Bitter. He runs on different fuels depending on what he's doing and what his training regimen is and all that. And this guy's breaking all the records. And you go, okay, look, let me learn from that. Is he evil because he eats sweet potatoes sometimes? He's running 100 miles. Give him a sting and break. So I think it's one of those things where you start realizing you can't be. It really comes from life experience. And what I see is if someone's engine's about to blow, we have to do some major work. If they just need a little tune-up or the oil change, just do an oil change. You don't do a major tune-up on someone just needs an oil change. And I think that's what all of us have the same philosophy on that. And over time, when your car's running better, you don't need the mechanic all the time because you got everything in alignment. So I think that's that's what we really have to look at. And it's not radical to say cut out the processed garbage. Everyone agrees on that. Everyone, I don't know anyone says no. I mean, no, I know people who say that just to be controversial, that Pop-Tarts every day are fine. But if you're looking at someone who's a weightlifter, that's an athlete that has no metabolic disease, they could probably get away with it, but I can't. I know I can't, right? So it's figuring out that individual is why we do what we do.
Yeah.
All of the credible approaches that were cut out junk foods. I mean, that's a common theme. We have more in common with other healthy diet patterns than we have differences, even though some people portray a meatitarian versus vegetarian as it's a false choice. I mean, there are a lot of ways to be healthy, and there are a lot of people who choose to do keto the rest of their life, and that new science basically says it's fine. And so this is going to be one of the first books that says if you want to stay keto, you improved your health and you want to stay, then fine, and here's how you do it. You don't have to add back, but if you want to add back carbs, you can. And getting more and more people who are at their goal metabolically, or if it's weight loss, that's it. But the reason people stay on it, it's interesting. It's usually something else other than just the weight. So people feel better. They have more energy. The one reason why we ask people to try keto, at least for a while, even if they don't fall into that at first, is that you may not know that your heartburn was from the carbs you were eating. You may not know that the joint pains were from the carbs you're eating. So the people come into it not thinking that, oh, I'm just getting older, I have joint pains. No, actually that was from the carbs you were eating. So haven't you seen that to be, most people, haven't you seen that to be true, that all these other things are getting better too? And that's a big reason why people stay away from sugar in the big picture.
Yeah, that's a good point. Before I forget, I know we want to say hi to Tro, but I just want to because I
will.
Oh,
welcome. This is the Low Carb MD Podcast. Welcome, man.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry for being late.
Wait, don't sidetrack Amy, man.
Patient care comes first. Sorry, guys. Patient
care comes first, and Tro likes to make an entrance,
And I figured out how to run I figured out how to run this thing now, Tro. So it's dangerous, man. I'm like Oz back here now. I figured out all the buttons. I'm hoping I'm recording this. But Amy, you had a thought. I don't want to mess you up.
I just Dr. Westman reminded me that, we do have that guide to okay, depending on where you are, this is the carb level you should start at. But we actually say in the book, even if that points you toward a higher intake, you might want to try the strict keto to see what happens, because the joint pain might go away. Even if you're at a quote unquote normal weight and you don't have diabetes, the acne might go away, the brain fog might go away, all of these things that people don't realize are related to diet. And then that person can decide, okay, do I want to stay keto because I feel so good? Or, do I want to increase? But I think there are benefits and effects you'll get in an actual ketogenic state that you won't get from the 80 to 90 grams of carbs.
Yeah, and that's where I really love your approach too, is like, look, get the person in the door and then we do what we can. So I have a lot of people that come and they go, I hate exercise, I'm not going to exercise. Then a month later they're exercising. They just want to. They don't feel like they're doing it for weight loss. They just say, I feel great. I have energy. I want to go do stuff. And their joints don't hurt, the heartburn, all these things. When I first started keto, it was because I was sick of dealing with diabetes complications, right? And then I see all these other things getting better. It's like, now what? Because you're like a snake oil salesman, because you're like, I see anxiety getting better, mood getting, all these things get better, and you think, oh my gosh, this is like, people think you're nuts, but you realize you're just taking away the bad stuff, and the body runs better on this fuel. That, and a lot of people decide, I really don't need that cookie that I thought I would have to have all the time, and their brain changes. That's the difference.
I think, first of all, I love both of you guys. You guys know that. Dr. Westman, a huge mentor of mine. Amy, I've loved your work. Absolutely loved Alzheimer's Antidote and The Stall Slayer. And this is just an amazing book. It's funny, you call it End Your Carb Confusion, but really it should be Keto Without the Crazy. You know what? I think
if I had to do it again, we might have called it that. But to not have keto in the title, hopefully will sort of entice more people that people would be put off by the keto word. So hopefully if they see carb, but yeah, that would make a good, maybe my next book.
I think one of the things that people don't understand is, when you deal with therapeutic carb restriction, it certainly has different amounts, and Dr. Westman has talked about that. Do you consider, 100 grams or 150 grams or 50 grams or 20 grams? And how do you figure out kind of where is your carb level? Certainly the entire population could benefit from carb restriction. I guess the question is how much? And I love your posts where you really trigger the diehard, zero carb carnivores with your carrot shavings, So can you help us understand? Because I have some ideas about that, but I want to hear, who do you pick? How low should they go, and who should go higher and who should go lower? People always ask us thyroid issues, and I know which you've written extensively about, and postmenopausal, and do you have any themes here that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think the further away you are from the health level that you want, the stricter you have to be. You can't mess around. If you already have type 2 diabetes, if you're living with morbid obesity or PCOS or, out of control hypertension, the more severe your illness, the more severe an intervention you need to come back. Like if you're in the hole, what you have to do to get out of the hole is different than what someone has to do to prevent themselves from falling in the first place. So I really think that really determines it. And even if somebody doesn't want to go fully strict keto, and we know that that's where they would do best, they might get plenty far going lowish carb. And sure, they might do even better going all the way keto, but if they're never going to do it, a diet only works if you're going to do it. So let's say they're going to get down to 100 grams of carbs. We all know people that could just stop drinking soda and they lose 20 pounds, or, they can get their blood sugar down. And yeah, maybe that's not perfect, but that's going to go a long way. And that's really it. Depending on how debilitated you are and how much weight you're looking to lose, then you have to go the lower carbs you need to be.
Yeah, and I think see, that's absolutely, and we've seen certain athletes, particularly when they're training, they absolutely do not like going low carb when they're in the middle of their season, but they absolutely love it when they're off season, right? Because their body composition improves, and when you're really taxing the body. And there's so many other examples of this where people started out very low carb and they felt great. And then as they've lost weight, they maybe eat a little bit more frequently than they once did, or eat a little bit more carbohydrates than they once did, and they feel just as good. So I think I think your approach is absolutely what's needed. It's not one size fits all. you know.
I have to apologize. There's leaf blowers outside my apartment right now.
I can't even hear them. Yeah,
Good,
I can't even hear
okay.
them. Yeah.
That is the worst invention in the history of the human race. The leaf blower. Anyway, but yeah,
Well, Amy, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, so I had to change my mic, but I don't know. My other one seems okay. I don't know, Troy. I think it's you, man. I think it's all right. We'll see.
You sound like a deep Barry Manilow for some reason today, or I don't know who's that guy with the
no.
deep voice?
You have a great baritone voice. Yeah.
There's something.
No, but I think it's the hand dryers that's the worst invention. Those ones in the bathroom that don't do anything.
Oh, yeah, those.
It might be the leaf blower. We'll talk. We'll leave it open to our people to figure it out.
Yeah, but Troy, you were talking about the athletes. You know, it's like in the off season, yeah, because during the off season when they're not exercising for a living and working out 8 hours a day, they tend to put on weight or get sick or something. And then we actually even mentioned in the book the professional athletes. There's, like look at Tim Noakes or these hardcore athletes that become diabetic. So even that level of exercise doesn't even make you immune to these problems. And then the one that we really mentioned is look at all the like retired pro football players and stuff that go on to become spokespeople for these medical weight loss centers or the shake companies. Because guess what? Maybe you could get away with 300 or 400 grams of carbs when you're playing professional football, but when you retire, you can't keep eating like a professional football player. You're not a professional athlete anymore. And, so many of these pro athletes really, beef up after retirement. And it's, yeah.
Well, not only after retirement, there was a great study with CGM use in sub-elite athletes that showed that a lot of them, about 20% were actually in the diabetic levels throughout the day, and many of them were in pre-diabetic levels throughout the day. So, it's certainly, we know that these athletes push their bodies to extremes. And I think the CGMs are actually reflecting that to some extent. This study was a magnificent study. So it may not be that they're, setting themselves up for later damage. There could be some element of real-time damage. And we've seen studies showing that, low carb athletes who are habituated to a low carb diet, when they eat high carb, it actually promotes arterial stiffness acutely. So like these acute bouts of hyperglycemia, I wonder if they have an effect, like in real time. So I think the long-term stuff, sure, but even maybe in the short term, there's cheat meals and, you're not cheating anybody, I think.
Yeah. Well, and before I forget, I want to go back to it's good for them for doing a study on athletes, because something that we mentioned in the book, because it's such a huge personal sticking point for me and maybe for all of us. I mean, all three of us were heavier in the past, and we live in such a fat phobic, size biased society. And we really emphasize in the book that it's not just about weight. You can be, again, I hate the phrase normal weight, because but that's what we say, you could be at a normal weight and still have cardiovascular disease and diabetes and metabolic syndrome and gout and all of these other things. So it's not about the weight, like if you're not overweight, you're not automatically protected from this stuff. And so, and we talk about also, not just, of course, something that this is such a huge sticking point. It's not just the blood sugar. So if you don't have diabetes, great. But then why? And your doctor says, well, you're not diabetic. See you in 6 months. See you next year. Well, doc, why can't I lose weight? Why do I still have PCOS? Why do I have acne? Why do I have fatty liver? And, because nobody's looking at insulin.
Yeah, that's a huge point. I think, there's so much of that where when we're focused on metabolic health, that's the key for all of us, figuring that weight can change. If you lift weights, I have people that have lost 2 pounds and everyone looks at them, they're wearing pant sizes when they were 40 pounds lighter because they're putting muscle mass on and getting rid of fat. So who cares about the weight at that point? But we're so hyper focused on that as a society where, we don't look at the insulin going, I believe her insulin went from 58 to 4. You think her longevity isn't better from that? I don't know of any other marker that's going to keep her around. Her triglycerides went from 400 down to 90. It's crazy. I mean, those are the kind of things we're looking at. Plus she didn't have to lose weight and she was doing fine.
And it's crazy. It's crazy how quickly that can happen. I mean, you guys see it. I don't generally see people's numbers all the time. You all do. How quickly that blood sugar comes down, how quickly the triglycerides come down. You know, like you guys have to stop people's, not type 1, but type 2. You can stop the insulin on the first day. I mean, it's nuts how quickly this works.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, but even type 1 patients were seeing a big insulin reduction. You know, and look, I think exactly what you're saying, you know, isolate the problem, figure out your disease, you know, degree of disease, and then kind of go from there. I love that pragmatic approach, and that's what I've always loved about your work, Amy. It's such a pragmatic, level-headed approach, non-zealous, and completely evidence-based. And, you know, certainly, obviously, that's true for Dr. Westman. Patient care comes first, Dr. Westman. We saw you in your full guard.
Sorry, I had to step out. I missed the last 10 minutes or so, but I wanted to brag about one of my patients who I just saw who, you know, and I have to say I'm a little jealous. I can't tweet about my patients. My university blocks me. So I'm glad you are able to tweet, and I'm trying to get a committee going to reevaluate the university policy, but you know, that's going to take a while.
If you need help going direct primary care, I know of a really cool, innovative doctor who helps other doctors do that. So he's, you know, he's just a little rash on Twitter.
Well, so this person had diabetes for 10 years and was on 120 units of insulin, and because she was eating a lot of carbs, so 120, 60 of it was long acting, 60 was short acting. The first day I cut it in half. So she's only on the long acting, and now she's back 8 weeks later, and she's only taking insulin even half as much on half the days because the blood sugars are plummeting down, and this is all without a CGM, but they're checking their own finger sticks, and so anyway, she loves it. She's down 15 pounds in 2 months, almost off all of her insulin, and anyway, what a great job we have, huh?
No, we literally have the best job, and I think, isn't it? You know, I thank our patients for trusting us. You know, I mean, I'm sure you've faced. I mean, now you're very well respected, published author, but I'm sure you've faced and continue to face probably some criticism for the things you do.
Well, fortunately, it's not like, you know. Julian, I wonder, so I'm a medical student with me for the month. If you, he's on the phone anyway. Yeah. So, well, I wondered if you wanted to talk about your experience on the rotation. Do you have a moment?
Yeah, so, let's bring him on.
Julian's
we got a special guest. This is great.
We're supposed to be, you know, what do you think about it? You just took off insulin and lisinopril, and have you ever deprescribed medicines before?
Not before this rotation, no.
Wait, can I ask you a question? What's your name?
Julian.
Julian? Okay, Julian, you're gonna have to speak a little loud so we can hear you. Yeah. And how many doctors' offices have you rotated in?
Many, both in and out of the hospital.
Okay, so in and out of the hospital, you've rotated in many doctors. How many times have you seen somebody come off of insulin or significantly reduce their insulin?
Before this rotation, probably 0. Or there's one other doctor here who
Yancey's not included, okay? So you can't include Yancey, okay? So because so Dr. Yancey, if you guys don't all know him, he's a brilliant colleague of Dr. Westman's and all of us who's lectured extensively on low carbs. So how many times?
Let's call it 0 then.
0 times, okay. And how many offices would you say, if you had to estimate, that you've been in, different doctors' offices?
Say 10 offices.
10 offices, right? And what do you think that says about medical care right now, the current medical care?
I think it's, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we have a sick care system rather than a preventive care system. and we accept a suboptimal food system that where companies prey on us and feed not so great food to lots of people, and then they get these diseases that are treated as uncurable, and they need to be mitigated rather than resolved, if not cured.
And can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
Okay, so what do you think is the biggest barrier to your colleagues learning about what you have seen in the past month?
I don't know if I could name a single one, but certainly in the medical world, there's a general lack of prioritization of food, nutrition, and the food environments that people are in. I think there is also a lack of motivation on the part of healthcare payers to reimburse obesity management and pay for not only the service of obesity management, but also the services of providing good food. And even like obesity medication is often not covered. And in terms of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, trust me. You keep going, because I think you're nailing it.
I think we're also sort of the mythology of fat being bad. It just hangs over us, and people who have done any tiny bit of reading will know that was politically motivated rather than scientifically motivated, and then that has just pervaded everything, and the food pyramid as well has very much changed how general people, but then also medical people approach food, because a lot of people assume it's about minimizing fat and eating whole grains, where really we should be maximizing good proteins and good vegetables.
Can I ask you a question?
I just found a new co-host, man.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's awesome. I mean, it tells you what we're up against, and to see it with your own eyes, you can't unsee what you've seen now. So when you go back and talk to your colleagues, they're going to look at you like you're nuts. What are you talking about? Who's this Westman guy? He has no idea. He doesn't know fat's killing people. Where is this guy in a shell somewhere? So that's what's so hard. That's what you're up against. It's hard when you see this and you wish it's like those pictures that are all blurry. Then you focus your eyes and see the big picture. No one else sees it. That's what you're up against. And so that's what we're all up against. But it gives me such hope to hear that, to have Dr. Westman training you and teaching you. It's unbelievable.
Dr. Westman, can you, so we asked your medical student there, really awesome. You sound like you have a bright future. I wish I caught his name. I didn't catch that part. Maybe, what do you think? Can I ask you a question? What do you think is the biggest barrier to more doctors doing what you and Dr. Lenskis and Amy, what she's been doing, and what I'm doing? What do you think is the biggest barrier to other doctors doing this are? What do you if you could name like the top 3 barriers that you think? He gave his reasoning. I'm just curious about yours.
Yeah, well, that was Julian Xie, and his band is called the Racinates.
Awesome.
He's a musician as well, and also started the Root Causes program to get fruits and vegetables to patients who are underserved. Anyway, he's a rising star. Can
I tell Julian one thing? Julian. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. I interrupted an absolute giant. I'm so sorry, but Julian, they did a study called the Faith DM study. I want you to take a look at it, because they went to the most underserved areas of New York City, and they went to food banks and created a system where they gave people with diabetes and their families whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. Okay, and they did it for 6 months, and they saw what happened to their diabetic outcomes. Do you want to know what happened?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Well, maybe if they didn't have the whole grains, that would have helped, Tro. That's a compounder for sure.
So I think we have to drastically rethink what we define as healthy, we have to drastically rethink what we define as healthy and how, and maybe it's a reflection of the advice we've given them, but maybe it's a reflection of the food environment and the outside forces. But to actually impact somebody is going to take a lot more than just getting them food, great food, and giving it to them. Maybe it was the food that they gave them, who knows, which was based on the standard guidelines, but was predominantly whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. Sorry. Okay, Dr. Westman, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. If you want to, we're going to use the term physical distancing and.
All right, we're good. Hey, I have a question for you too, since we have the two smart people here. What do we do? I know we have the stall slayer here. So what do we do with these patients who initially have trouble losing weight or plateau for a long time? What's your best approach mentally and advice-wise to help those people?
Well, should I start, or is that for Dr. Westman?
You're the stall slayer, so you start.
I think the first step is to really examine your diet, and don't kid yourself. What are you eating? There's some, like we were saying earlier, some people can have 50, 60, 70 grams of carbs and still lose weight. Some people really have to bring that down. And, sometimes we call it carb creep, because it's not like you wake up and drink a glass of orange juice and have a stack of pancakes. It's these little bits here and there, I'll just have one bite of that. Or, you're clearing off your kid's plate after dinner. I'll just finish that one fish stick. It adds up, and it's not deliberate. People don't realize it's happening. And then, of course, the fat, people, keto is not unlimited fat. We embrace and love and enjoy the fact that we get to eat the ribeye steak now and the blue cheese and the avocado, but it's not unlimited. And people tend to get into trouble with that. But so that's the first step, is what exactly are you eating? And be honest about every morsel. I normally recommend against tracking because it makes people crazy, but that's a good reason to track, is if you're not getting where you want to go, look at what you're actually doing. And then beyond that, you guys can speak better to, like, there's medications that either make you gain weight or make it harder to lose weight. Thyroid is massively under-recognized, I think, thyroid problems. And when it is recognized, it's very poorly treated and addressed, I think. And then, like Brian was saying earlier, the stress and sleep and all that impacts us. Now, I think the diet has a much, much bigger impact than any of that other stuff, but we can't ignore that other stuff. So there's a lot of, it's not really one factor that could be stalling. You just kind of have to look at the whole picture, like, all right, what is going on here?
Can I just say, I've been working with Brian now for, oh my God, is it going to be 2 years? Holy crap. Wow. Brian, you've gotten old.
My beard was dark back then.
And you're still speaking to each other.
And
we still like each other. It's crazy.
When he went to a busy practice, and so Dr. Westman, this is secretly geared towards you, this message, but when he transitioned his practice to be able to spend more time with his patients and kind of be more private oriented, private sector oriented, he, I want to say, he just like his whole demeanor, the stress went down. He dropped, like, I don't know, at least a couple pounds of water weight. He was telling me how easy it was for him to fast. I mean, and Brian, you know about tracking, right? You know how to track, right? You know how to track food, but like, I think people don't realize at the end of it, we're animals that are driven to eat, and stress and sleep are things that drive animals to eat. And I'm not sure, like, you can track all you want, but you have to look at that whole picture. What are the different things that are driving me to eat or driving me to have sweet cravings or food cravings? And I cannot stress the importance of the stress and sleep. I view it as our biggest cause of weight regain in our practice is actually stress, acute stress. I mean, and then you're shaking. I mean, if Dr. Eric Westman agrees, I know
he agrees with us. We can't believe it. That's why we get this on video, just for documentation.
Well, now stress can work through eating, can work through metabolism slowing down, so it's not like there's a specific hormone that, okay, everything's wrong. It has many different ways of playing out. for example, I have a patient who has an occupational hazard. He's an architect. And he would say for years, architects, we work really hard. Oh, yeah, right. Well, now I'm starting to, like, he doesn't sleep. I mean, they work so hard. So they're actually trained in college they're up all-nighters every week to finalize the project. So it's an interesting occupation where that is carried over into their profession. And I've now verified it in several other architects because I didn't believe them, but he is very resistant to losing weight because he doesn't sleep.
Well, I want to throw another wrinkle into this. This is something I'm observing. I have no data on this other than some anecdotal data, but I'm seeing patients, for instance, one of my patients has had a strict, as a matter of fact, I probably have it sitting on my desk, straight down weight loss. Here it is. I'll show it to you guys. So I can look kind of cool with the cool kids for a second here. So that's her weight loss over since I've been working with. It's a straight line down. You don't see that very often.
Your stock portfolio.
Yeah, there's my stock. Yeah, there's my stocks right now, right? So it may be backwards for you, but it's going straight down, right? And I'm thinking, how in the heck is she not plateauing this whole time? But she had very little visceral fat. Her visceral fat was like 1.1, but she had a lot of peripheral fat. So what I'm finding is people with a lot of visceral fat, because we're tracking that with the body composition scale. So I'm seeing people lose their visceral fat down to a certain point, then they go to peripheral fat and they start losing a bunch of weight. Then they start going back to the visceral fat again, and then they're losing inches, but their weight's not changing. And Dr. O'Meara has some interesting studies with MRI showing that as people lose visceral fat, the intra-abdominal muscle goes up. So if you're replacing fat with muscle, you're going to see your body shrinking, but the weight's not going to change that much. So the problem we run into is a lot of people hit a plateau, but they're really not plateaued. It's physiologically just changing how you're burning energy. So has anyone seen anything like this or described this? I haven't seen anything in the literature about it, but it's very intriguing to me.
It's beyond my knowledge, and I'm afraid you're now in that boat exploring the new world where no one else has been. So it may be that you don't get plateaus. So I've been struck by the when you do a keto approach. I mean, beyond the carb creep, which happens a lot, that's not a plateau, right? And then if the metabolic rate slows down over time, it rarely goes to totally flat. So I think that's a very interesting question. I don't know. So the clinical world right now is in front of the scientific world. So this is where I'm getting you guys successfully to write up case studies and case reports, and we put them in the literature, and then that's going to drive scientists to look in this direction. But if you can document these changes with ideas, and then what we do scientifically is try to disprove what you're seeing, right? I mean, you might think this is what it is and this is why. Well, that's science would say, well, maybe it's something else, and we would try to create a study of some sort to verify or replicate or have a control group to see if that is indeed the mechanism.
Yeah, we'll have to get Ben Bickman a call and say, hey, help us with this, because I'm convinced that visceral fat takes more energy to burn off, because that's where I'm seeing that's what, I don't know whether it holds less water, peripheral fat holds, I have no idea. But we're seeing once they switch back and forth, and we can see it as we're monitoring what's happening. So it's intriguing. And I don't know how much I trust the body composition scales and all that stuff. That may be a factor for sure, but we have to do some research at some point. Steve
Finney would be the one to ask these details. He has done fat biopsies on thousands of people. And in fact, that's a tool that might make obesity medicine a real specialty at some point. You know, Troy, you asked how, or Brian, how did we get more people involved? Well, generally you have to get people money, right? People don't go to work for free. So we want obesity medicine doctors and what we do to get good reimbursement and good payment. And within the insurance system, that generally is linked to a procedure. So if we could develop a fat biopsy that you send it away, you get a reading, and we're the only ones who know how to read it, kind of like the EKGs at first, only cardiologists could read it. You can get a little payment for the body composition, But the reason I said Finney is that he explained that the composition of fat in the visceral area is quite different than in the arm, for example, because in the arm it gets really cold and the fat congeals, like it gets turned solidified in the cold. I mean, the body doesn't work well when the fat isn't liquidy. So the composition is very different, and that would make sense that you would access the store differently. But I don't know how to fine tune that yet. But
that's why we bring smart people on to give us advice, right? So that would make sense logically to me, that if it's holding out the more liquid and you know, you're diuresing more, that the weight would change more. So that's why when people first go on keto, a lot of times they're dropping their insulin and their weight goes, but it's not fat weight they're losing, it's water weight at the beginning. So when someone says, I lost 15 pounds in a week, you're like, you didn't lose 15 pounds of fat in a week unless you have some miracle thing that you're doing, right?
And you brought up a good point, everybody, in that, you know, we're so obsessed with the scale. I'm like asking about a stall. I forgot the most important part, and there's a whole chapter on this in that book, The Stall Slayer. Are you actually stalled? If your scale weight is not changing, but you're losing inches, you're not stalled. Or if your scale weight is not changing, but your liver fat is decreasing or something else is happening, you know, that people have, women especially, have very little appreciation for changes in the body, in the shape, the size, what's going on inside, even if the number on the scale doesn't stay the same or possibly even increases, right? I've been heavier than I am now, but I've been smaller because I was more muscular. People really have to start having an appreciation for all of this nuance instead of just looking at one number that tells you almost nothing. It just tells you your total weight, how much of that is fat, how much of it is bone, how much of it is organs, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. Huge point. And looking at insulin levels, insulin resistance, all those things, because we all know, all four of us know, we can have people lose a bunch of weight. We can have you put on 400 calories of gummy bears a day and you're going to lose weight. I can guarantee that. It's non-sustainable and you're going to be sicker by the time you're done it, and you're going to gain all that weight back. I can 100% guarantee you. You could go on any of these liquid diets that people are pushing. I've never one time seen success long-term on that kind of diet, not once in my career. So you start looking at and say, well, how do I sustain weight loss? I have to put on muscle mass and I got to get rid of visceral fat, right? Then you're healthy, like Amy's saying, then you're a healthier organism and you can get away with more stuff. Who cares if the carbs you're eating are going to your muscle? It's not going to hurt you doing that. Unless you're taking excessive amounts that have to be stored and you have to spike a bunch of insulin. But in reasonable people, it's not unreasonable to have some, you know, sweet potatoes or something like that every now and again. So I think that's a huge point that we're all kind of saying the same thing.
Well, as long as we're talking about this heresy, like you could eat a sweet potato and not actually die immediately. I want to mention one thing about our book. You know, I think all four of us have in common being realistic and realizing that people are only going to stick to a way of eating that is doable, that is sustainable for them, that is appropriate for their, like we were talking earlier, the budget, the cooking skills. And I love something Tro says that I just think is gold: binge low carb and live to fight another day. You know, if you're a compulsive overeater, if you're a binge eater, and Dr. Westman, when people say, I'm an emotional eater, he says, well, can you at least not emotionally eat carbs? Like if you have to emotionally eat, can you binge on pepperoni? Can you binge on pork rinds? And, you know, I wholeheartedly believe that, you know, in an ideal world, we would never want something sweet. We would never overeat. If you do, can you have sugar-free things? Can you have the Quest bar like Tro talks about? We are
Adapt bar. Don't forget Adapt bars.
On Adapt bars.
Yeah.
We don't fear monger about the artificial sweeteners or about even something like, you know, heaven forbid, soybean oil mayonnaise, you know, salad dressing that's $1.99. Not everyone can afford a $9 bottle of salad dressing. So we have to, and the good thing is you can reverse type 2 diabetes eating the regular food. You know, if you have the budget to support that other stuff or the local farms, do it. But if you don't, the fear mongering that goes on within our own community is so off-putting and so, why are we raising the bar to entry for this? Don't we want to lower the bar and make it as easy and simple for people to get into this? Why are we saying supermarket chicken is killing you and this is bad for you? I think all of us want this to be accessible to the most people, and we want to lower the difficulty to get into it. So that's something in our book. And I think we're going to take a lot of heat for it, but I think we're prepared, because if you have morbid obesity and type 2 diabetes, would it be better to drink water than Diet Mountain Dew? Maybe, but is Diet Mountain Dew better than regular? Yes, please. Can you switch to diet as the transition step, you know?
Yeah, it's methadone versus heroin. I think that's what we all kind of look at. And I think for instance, one of my patients, this patient who's killing it. I mean, she's lost all this weight. She said, Thanksgiving, I had some nuts and I'm craving nuts like crazy now. Every day I'm thinking about nuts. I want nuts. And so she said, I never should have done that because it messed up my brain somehow, right? And she realizes that she's coming. I'm not telling her, she's telling me, but she's staying away from them, but still. And it's one of those things that where some people, and really, I think we all kind of agree, it's that individual. Some people can have one drink of wine and then they don't need it for 2 months. Other people have one drink and they're in the alley in a week, right? So I think for the patient to realize who they are and us to work around that, because some people need a zero tolerance. If you have one piece of cookie and you can't stop for a month, you're in trouble. Like my patients who went, the only one that's gone off the rails are these people. I just found out yesterday, but they got back on, but it took 9 days because I wasn't in contact with them during that time. But if I was, they would think, oh, we're meeting with him tomorrow. We don't want to mess it up. So this accountability makes a big difference, right? So it's a big picture.
I had a couple thoughts there. The little secret, I have a visiting occupational therapist here today, actually, who is using this for lymphedema. And he got into the lymphedema seminars, or Catherine Seo and Leslyn Keith. Actually, Leslyn is selling a program to other occupational therapists, and he loves it. They have hundreds of pounds lost. And what's interesting is the advanced course, you go in, you ask, are you having any hunger? And, it's usually no. If someone says, well, yes, yeah, hunger, must be eating carbs. And then you say, what are you craving? And then in this case, your patient probably said, well, nuts. Oh, bing, 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 you're having nuts. So we crave what we eat. And what's amazing is that you can have nuts on, or pie, pumpkin, whatever, on Thanksgiving, and it affects you for 2 weeks. I mean, the cravings will still be there. Yeah, it messes with the neurotransmitters. And so anyway, that's sort of the advanced course when I'm teaching someone how to troubleshoot. And then, of course, if they're eating carbs, they know they're eating carbs. You don't have to call them out on it.
And she's great. And for her, she said, I'm not even hungry and I want them. Like she goes, this is crazy. I'm not even hungry. And I'm never hungry, but I want them. So you start realizing, if you have a certain food, if you give me a can of tuna that's sitting here, or you give me barbecued ribs, I'm going to say, oh, I'm hungry with the ribs. The tuna can sit there for a month. I'm not going to be that hungry to have that sometimes, or whatever,
So the other question I want to loop back to is, how do we get more people to do this, doctors included? Exposure for the students. So having an elective at a medical school like I have will get people like Julian, who we just saw, exposed to it, and it's something that years later they still remember, and even might become a doctor like this, which makes me think that you guys should team up with a local university if you can, become an adjunct clinical professor of some kind, and get part of a rotation where students come. And yes, there is the old saying of, show me a student that only doubles my work and I will really be happy with them. But I mean, the teaching, if it's something you'd like to do and come naturally, we need to teach and expose medical students. And then there's a new organization called the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. So we're creating a organization where doctors can come, get in part of the tribe, so to speak, of people who think in the same way. So I'm optimistic that things are changing in that way, but it's excruciatingly slow. But maybe we can help you if you want to get some students in your practices so they can see what's going on.
What's funny? I have several coming up in January, February, coming in to rotate and see what we're doing, because I think it's one of those things. Once they see it, their brain gets messed up. Because you're saying, this guy, like, if they saw the patients I saw last week, that they wouldn't know what to do. And then The problem is when you go back and they say, oh, those guys don't know what they're talking about. Give them insulin. That'll make the sugars go down fast. And, you know, we're up against a lot, and there's a lot. It's the educational system that's flawed. And, you know, like Julian said, like, people aren't thinking for themselves. You tell them what to do, and you kind of do what people say without looking and saying, it's not working, guys. Like, to be in all those offices and not see anyone come off insulin, and then come in yours and see these people coming up. In my first 6 months of doing low carb, I had 11 people come off insulin. I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. I mean, knowing what I know, I was stunned, you know? So, you know, and we have the advantage of having people who are really scared. If you just get diagnosed with diabetes, come see me, right? It's fun for me because I know what we can do. We just got to make some tweaks. And like you said, Amy, with soda, I had a guy gave up soda, lost 36 pounds in 6 weeks, just giving up soda. I'm a genius. One intervention, that's ridiculous. You know, so I think it's, you know, say, hey, can you just give up the soda to start with? Can you just give up this? And like you're saying, it's a stepwise approach for that patient. Some people just jump in the deep end and go, I'm going keto right off the start. Other people say, let me ease into this thing and figure out, I'll get rid of cereal for now, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've been listening to everything you guys have been saying, and I've just made mental notes. Amy, what you mentioned about not being beholden to the scale a long time ago was so insightful. You know, and then, you know, Brian, you kind of, you know, harped on that for a long time. It's like, should we make the scales our moral compass? You know, and I think not, right? I think absolutely not. Oh, we lost Dr. Westman there. Hopefully he comes back. But, you know, do you think that focusing on the scale actually prevents some people from kind of doing better in their diet? And Amy, and you mentioned carb creep, but have you seen kind of like fat creep? I call it fat creep in our office. But this concept where maybe somebody came in and they've never really had macadamia nuts, or they've never really used, you know, had fatty foods or cheese or butter and sausages, and now all of a sudden they're craving these things. So can you talk about the scale as a moral compass? And maybe we talked about carb creep. What about fat creep?
Yeah. Oh, two great questions. I'm hoping Dr. Westman just had a patient or something. And I have to apologize. I've been calling him Dr. Westman, and I've been calling you Ryan and Tro. Like, I should. I mean,
no. It's just
I have respect for the good doctors.
Some people deserve more respect than others. So we're
I mean, I normally like when
this is how we roll. We're always Brian and Tro. I don't care. Like
I usually.
It just reminds me of my med school loans, and upsets me. So don't worry. I mean, we're good. You know us. Come on, we're friends. We're old friends. That don't matter. So my wife calls me Dr. Lenskis, though. Does your wife call you Dr. Tro?
I think
you guys probably like that. So with the scale as moral compass, I mean, you could write a whole book on that, frankly. And I think it affects women more than men, but men, you know, unfortunately, men are starting to have these body dysmorphia and these kind of issues too. That, yeah, a woman could step on the scale, and that number, at least in her own mind, determines her self-worth as a person. I'm up 2 pounds, therefore I'm a failure. I'm a terrible mom. I'm a terrible employee. I just suck at life, you know, or it just determines your whole mood for that day. And this has got to stop. I mean, it's just a number. It's a number. And I've been there myself. Like, I know it's not easy to divorce yourself from that, but this is why, you know, many of us recommend against weighing daily, because you'll make yourself nuts. Or if you do weigh yourself every day, you absolutely have to understand that these little blips are normal. It's water, it's not body fat, these little ups and downs. And then, you know, but on the other hand, some people, I recognize that weighing daily for some people helps keep them on the straight and narrow path. So you have to know yourself. But yeah, this scale number, you know, like everyone's talking about the obesity epidemic. Can we talk about the jerk epidemic? Like, I want to use a swear word. This is a family show. Can we talk about
you can swear. We do it all the time.
Do you? Like, can we talk about the a-hole epidemic that's going on in this country? Can we talk about the vile, the anger and vitriol
preaching to the choir?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, you're carrying 50 extra pounds, but you're a nice, kind, gentle soul. I would rather you have 50 extra pounds and be a decent human than have rock solid abs and be a complete you know what.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. I've noticed that too. Amy, you know, I've commented a lot on that because I think someone loses 150 pounds, they go, oh my God, look how gross your extra skin is. Like, they've lost 150 pounds. Like, you thumb down these things, and it's troubled me for a long time, because you have to feel sad for those people because they can't be happy. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, that's great, look at you. I mean, you're taking...
Nobody who's satisfied with their own life lashes out at strangers on the internet. I mean, that's just...
Man, I've seen you attack. You're one of the most reasonable people on that, for sure. You get Tro deserves it, but in your case, you look at it, you know, in public at least. But, you know, I think it's one of those things where you say, look, I'm trying to be level. And, you know, the problem, the big problem is for you to see something and say, this is what I'm observing, and I'm seeing this, and people say you're a jerk because you're observing this. I can't tell you, I can't help you. You know, like with Tro and I took a ton of heat when we said, maybe there's some connection with addiction and obesity and alcohol, and it's panned out, and there's tons of data on that. But people said specifically we should have our license revoked for talking about, even considering it. Like, I think you should have yours revoked for not even considering, because look at the data and look what we see, you know? Yeah. But most of these are people who are academics sitting in the office somewhere. They haven't put a stethoscope on a patient in years, so they have no clue. So that, I mean, I think we've made that point of saying, look, when we see things on the front lines, we have to observe it. Then we have to study it. But who's going to pay for the study? You know, I mean, it has to be financed. It's not just like you say, let's just grab some patients to do a study. It's a lot of work, and I don't want to deal with it. So I'll just make my observations and help my patients.
Yeah, Dr. Westman tells the story of when he first started learning about all this himself, and he met Dr. Atkins. And, you know, Dr. Westman is like all on the research, that, well, where's the research? Where's the data? And Dr. Atkins said, what do I need a study for? I've got 30 years of patients here. I know I don't need a study. I know what's going to happen. You know, like your own clinical expertise and judgment is really there's what happens in rats and mice and petri dishes, and then there's what happens in actual human beings that are not in a metabolic ward, you know. And with
stress and life and divorces and, you know, getting fired from your job, all these things affect us. So we're not sitting in a ward where you go, here's 400 calories a day, let's see what your metabolism does. It's garbage. It's
and
so
you don't
it's
have
not
the
real
option
life
to go to the fridge at midnight.
Even Tro understands that.
Amy,
no, I'm joking. That's what Tro has said, and Tro's made some. You know, this is what's so great about us coming together. I've learned a ton from Tro. Right, we tease each other. You know, Amy, you know, Tro could be a little vocal.
You mesh well. You learn from each other, and I wanted to say
we've mentored. Yeah, totally. We've mentored each other, and that's like with you and Dr. Westman. You know, I mean, you have a different perspective and say, have you thought about that? And you can help each other say, let's fine tune this better from what you've been doing for years. Even though it's working, maybe we can even do better. Right. So I think that's the point. It's like, I think the arrogance has to stop. That's what I see. If you're arrogant, I mean, it's different. I think there's a difference between saying this is what I'm seeing, because when good friends of mine get the medical board saying, hey, you're doing this crazy low carb stuff, they've taken tons of people off insulin. What is the standard of care taken? How many people, like Julian said, how many people have you seen come off insulin? Never. For 14 years of my practice, I never saw one person come off insulin. Right. And in 6 months, 11, you can tell me that doesn't work? Yeah. Sorry, I've seen it.
You can't unsee what you've seen. And with regard to the arrogance, I see it, you know, not from the medical professional side, but like online, people that have themselves lost 100 pounds, reversed their diabetes, all of these things, sometimes they are the most judgmental of others who are still in that sick world. And I'm like, why are you talking down to these people? Why are you shaming them? 2 years ago, that was you. None of us were born knowing about low carb and keto. And I think that's what I hate the most, is the people that have come a long way, judging the people that are either just starting or haven't even started yet. You know, or like people say, oh, I saw this very fat lady at the grocery store and I can't believe she had donuts in her cart. Okay, A, you're not the food police. B, you know nothing about that lady, nothing. Maybe she's actually doing keto. Maybe she's already lost 100 pounds and she's just having a bad day and she's having donuts. Like, we just judge. And I really, because, you know, everyone who thinks that way, you started out there too, or somewhere close to it. And I'm done with that kind of attitude. But Tro, you had asked something else what was it?
We talked about the moral compass of the scale, and then
the fat creep.
Yeah,
fat creep is definitely a thing. It's definitely, and part of it is I think the people coming from a low fat calorie restriction mindset, all of a sudden the handcuffs are off. I can have butter, I can have bacon, I can have cream cheese and macadamia nuts. And I think they just go a little crazy on it. It's just a little like, yes, you can have it, but it's not unlimited. And I think also, you know, part of that comes from the unfortunate fear of protein that people have too. People are afraid of eating a little bit more. If they're hungry, they think they're not supposed to have more protein. So rather than reaching for a second egg or another piece of chicken or pork, they'll have a fat bomb or they'll have 3 ounces of nuts. And they would have been better off having another, you know, half a piece of steak or something like that. So I think there's those two reasons, but that's, again, that's where or, you know, heavy cream, are you having cream with your coffee or coffee with your cream? So there's a lot of that there. I think carb creep is definitely a thing.
Yeah, the things that really strike me about where you're talking about the themes of judging the person on an obesity journey, right, on a weight loss journey, I absolutely agree with you. Judging the people who are shaming people on a low carb ketogenic diet, other doctors, other dietitians, you know, who say it's disordered eating, who say it's not appropriate, who say that fat is a foe. You know, these are the people that I want to absolutely demolish. Okay, absolutely demolish, because they are preventing people from. It would be like, this is a proven, a modality to lower A1C. Right? So you wouldn't do that about metformin. You wouldn't say like, oh my God, I wouldn't do that metformin fad. Right? You wouldn't do that. Okay. So, I just don't understand. I have no room for dietitians, nutritionists who are biased against, carbohydrate restriction. That's, and they'll shame and they'll turn everything. I mean, they literally they'll turn anything around on a low carb proponent, like don't use the CGM, that's entitlement. That's, I think that's something that bothers me. Yes, it kills me to see people get fat shamed. It kills me. It kills me to see somebody have, be shamed for like, going somewhere and getting, chicken wings fried in soybean oil and to be shamed for that. Or, something that's like, it's not, yes, it may be some ideal, but it's like not a big picture item, right? For most people, that kills me. But what really kills me is the bias against low carb. That really hits me at my soul.
I've always wondered, my mother is deceased and she had type 2 diabetes. She was on insulin, the whole 9 yards. And, she was like a polypharmacy. She was on so many drugs and who knows what kind of interactions they were having. But you'll often hear people that have some kind of medical condition say, oh, I go to so-and-so center. He's the best doctor in the city. Or I go to this person. She's the best one in the If they're the best, why are you still sick? Why do you need more and more medication every time you go back? How good can they possibly be if you're not getting any better? Isn't it the doctor's job to make you better? Unless, there are always things that are truly progressive, But I've always, that phrase has always struck me as funny. I'm sure you hear people in your own families, oh, I'm good. My guy's the best one. And how best can this person be if you keep getting sicker and sicker?
I'm absolutely with you. I'm absolutely with you. And many of them actually, do absolutely despicable tactics, right? I was just looking at an obesity medicines doctor who has a kids program for 8-year-old kids, basically a fat camp, so that, hey, parents, prevent bullying, get your kids off on the right track, just absolutely abusing the parents' desire to be there for their kids, abusing the struggles of obese children to sell spots in a obesity medicine program in their office.
Yeah.
It just kills me. It pains me.
That kind of stuff, I'm sure I've heard this from clients. I'm sure you get this from patients. That unfortunately sets a lot of people up on a lifetime of yo-yoing. Like Amy, I just talks about this all the time, right? you get set up on that lifetime of dieting and restricting, and because that's a mental and emotional thing too. You think you are flawed in some way, right? You're heavy, you have to do these things that other people don't have to do, and it's a head game. It's a real head game for a lot of those people, and it's almost emotional abuse to the level that some of these people are affected for a lifetime by that kind of thinking as a child.
Yeah, it's I think it's gross. With that, let's open it up to questions. Okay, we're gonna get some questions from some of our live audience. All right, these are people from our practices.
Friends. Hey, and I wanted to just look at Brian Wiley. 10 years sustained weight loss. I mean, we have person after person that are doing it. Amy, she's amazing. So when you see this stuff and they say not sustainable, okay. People have done this forever. How many? What you're recommending, is that sustainable? I mean, that's what it comes down to, is we're looking for the long term. We're not looking for the quick fix, right? All of us, metabolic health, but we know we can. The thing is, this is the point that Amy brought up, which is the most important thing that we're talking about, is metabolic health. We can get metabolically healthier in a few days. We're in the midst of an epidemic where that's who's dying. That's the numbers. That's the facts. So you say, if I can make an intervention to help my patient, then that's what I want to do. And if you don't lose 30 pounds the first week, you could drop your insulin significantly very quickly. And we're following that. And you could drop your sugar levels. And we know if your sugar's over 180, your chance of dying goes up drastically. It's probably the biggest marker we have, other than maybe vitamin D. So, it's really critical that we look at this big picture of stress, lifestyle, and that's why your book is so important. It's called Your Carb Confusion for anyone. I'm going to hold it up for anyone who's going to watch this online, but it's awesome. It's awesome because it's real and it's practical, and it's not where all the you're saying what your clinical experience is, and I think that there's a ton of value.
Thank you. And it is available for pre-order. The official release date is actually this coming Tuesday, the 15th.
Awesome. Can you answer a quick question? What do you do when you're overdoing the low carb, keto, fake foods? What's your strategy? That's one of the questions. Yeah, when you're overdoing the low carb, quote unquote junk. That's one of our first questions.
Well.
What do you do when you find yourself, doing one too many fat bombs or low carb cookies or low carb whatever, Quest bars?
Yeah, well, it depends on how you're wired. For some people, cut it off. And none. Go completely abstain as best you can. I think that's one way. But another way is, why are you eating that stuff? Are you maybe not having large enough meals? Like, are you not eating enough actual food that you're finding yourself wanting to go to the fat? Fasting is so popular, but I think some people take it too far, and they try to fast, and instead of eating a meal because they're scared to eat, they'll have a little fat bomb, or they'll have a whatever. And they would have been better off having a piece of fish and some vegetables. So that's one issue, is make sure your meals are large enough that you maybe have less of a need to have that other stuff. Other than that, if it's sweet cravings, that's different. If you're having a lot of keto sweets, or you could just have rosettes. If you're gonna have the stuff, have rosettes, baked good. So I wish there was an easier answer. Do you guys have any good thoughts on that?
No, I view it actually quite similarly. I'm gonna try to pile in one more question before we go on timing here, unless Brian, you have something to add in there.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah.
So we got a question here: strategies for figuring out your carb tolerance. Any strategies?
Well, yeah. I mean, I hesitate to say testing your blood glucose. Well, so in our book, we walk people through how to increase over time. And let's say you're going to go from the phase that's 20 grams or a day or fewer. The next phase is 50 or fewer, but you don't go from 20 to 50 overnight. You don't wake up one morning and have 2 pieces of toast for breakfast. You very gradually increase by like 5-gram increments a week. So generally that means starting off with larger portions of the non-starchy vegetables you were already having, more broccoli, more zucchini, whatever. Then small amounts of berries, small amounts of like butternut squash. But to determine your tolerance starting out, again, the further you are from where you want to be, whether that's weight or health, the lower you probably need to be. The rest of it, you could use a glucose meter, you could use a CGM, but And please, like, I would love to know your thoughts about this. When I see people online who should know better, if you've been on a keto diet for a long time, and then you do have a bowl of oatmeal or you have whatever, you are going to get a massive blood glucose spike because you're fat adapted, your body just doesn't need the glucose. But I think it's misleading when people say, see, I ate an apple and my blood glucose skyrocketed. You know that's going to happen. Why aren't you explaining that that's a perfectly normal physiological response in that context? So I'm worried that if somebody is trying to use a CGM or a glucose meter to test, you can't just all of a sudden eat a bagel when you've been on keto for a year. We gradually increase it. So you might be able to eat some carb foods, but you can't just toss them in all of a sudden. You have to very gradually. Does that make sense? Like, that's because you're going to think you don't have the tolerance for a certain item when maybe you do. You just have to ramp that up a little bit slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely correct. That's it. It's like it would be the same as saying I'm going to run a marathon on my first run. You don't do that. You ramp up to that. You slowly build up and you do it that way. You don't go and have all this crazy, because I guarantee you your sugar is going to spike because your body's not used to having to spike the insulin like it has to get rid of those kind of foods. It's just common sense. So people use all these things have been used that it's bad science. I'm telling you, like, you know, these athletes, they test them within the first 3 weeks. Of course, you're not fat adapted. Of course, you're not going to do well. And I've seen that clinically. So, you know, all these things, and the continuous glucose monitor, that's why it's critical for people with experience to monitor it. Because people have said every doctor should have a continuous glucose monitor. The problem is every doctor is going to see you spike your sugar when you're eating crappy food for lunch. And then they're going to give you insulin to get rid of that high sugar instead of saying, don't eat the terrible stuff. It makes me crazy every time I deal with doctors who say that, because it's like, so you're treating the medicine with food, right? So, because otherwise you get low sugar, and it makes you crazy. So yeah. And there was another one, there was a good question here. It says, have you seen people who've gained or lost 100 pounds plus on keto, gained back half or all of it, and then were able to successfully go back on keto and lose it again?
Not personally. No, you guys might have in more of a medical setting. Most of the people who come to me are not in that kind of state. So, but I'd be surprised if that never happened. Like, I'm pretty sure that has probably happened. I mean, look at the bariatric patients who lose that massive amount of weight, regain it, and then some, then find keto and can lose it and keep it off. So I'm sure it's happened. You guys have maybe seen it, and I haven't.
Yeah, I've just anecdotally seen that some people who are on Atkins or something, most of the time, I'm telling you, people go on a liquid diet, they lose a bunch of weight, then they come to me. And that's challenging because the metabolic rate, everything's screwed up, and it takes a long time to get results. So I think, I think when you damage your metabolic system, because if you're losing, there's estimates that 24% of your weight loss is muscle mass when you're doing a starvation diet. That's your metabolic rate. You've screwed yourself, because when you go back to eat the normal stuff you used to, now your weight's going to be higher than it does. That's the only thing that makes any sense. So then it gets harder and harder.
The scale is not the best tool to use.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem, because I've seen people lose a ton of weight on a liquid diet, which is mostly sugar, right? And soybean oil and that kind of stuff, but it's calorie restricted, but their insulin's through the roof still. They haven't fixed that problem.
They've lost weight, but it's how much of that is fat and how much of it is muscle that you absolutely don't want to lose.
Exactly. And that's the point, is like, if you put on 10 pounds of muscle, are you upset? No, you put on 10 pounds of muscle, you're a way better machine than you were before that. So the scale is a big problem for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Westman, who had to go take care of patients, he texted me. And Amy, this book is absolutely amazing. Even a patient just grabbed it out of my office already because they just were so excited. It should be called Keto Without the Crazy, but we'll take End Your Carb Confusion. Yeah, End Your Carb Confusion. And you can pre-order it on Amazon. Guys, go out and get it. And thank you so much for coming in to both of you.
Thank you. Always love talking to you guys.
Brian, it's absolutely always a pleasure. And thank you, Patreon supporters and members of our practice. We appreciate your guys' involvement here.
Yeah, and thank you for the great questions. And thank you for joining us early in the morning here on the West Coast. And it's such an honor to have people like this. Like Amy, I liked her from day one, and I got to meet her, and she's a great person, and she cares. Dr. Westman is salt of the earth, and he's just who he is. He's just chill and mellow, and he said, look, here's my data, guys. He doesn't fight with people. You never see him get into troll wars on the Twitter, but the point is we all have our place. and you need warriors on the front line. You need people that have evidence and research and all this stuff. So we're surrounded by a lot of great people, and it's almost embarrassing how many we try to stay out of. Obviously, we don't get any financial benefit of your book, right? But as a clinician, I love it because I want to have more tools for my patient, because your book is going to reach people that we just interviewed Gary Taubes. His book may not reach some people that may be too scientific. Maybe, Jason Fung's may be complicated for some people or whatever. So all these things come together to educate people and help people and are changing lives. And you all are doing great work. So I appreciate that. And, Patreon supporters, thank you. And our patients and our practice, thank you for trusting us with your care in your lives. That means a lot. And, we're going to continue to learn. We may change what we're saying in a year or two based on data and experience. So it's really exciting, and we're in some exciting times. So thank you all for joining us and for sticking with us this long. I know we went over, but when you have two of the greatest minds in nutrition,
I disagree with that part, but thank you for saying that.